Okay, W6WUH Valiant video number 7. By rights, this easily could have been part of video number 1. When you get a radio, you want to give it a look over top and bottom for completeness, for obvious electrical or mechanical problems, and see if it's been modified or damaged in some way. I didn't show you that earlier because there's two ladies who pick up the radio, but let's just go through here and take a quick look. Here's a couple of things. Here's a couple of electrolytic capacitors. One end is floating out in the air, and they're just hanging there by their leads. They were poorly installed, and somebody's been goofing around. We're going to look at electrolytic capacitors and paper capacitors to see if the thing has been overhauled. Here's original paper capacitors in the audio section. We know from experience that we want to get rid of any old paper capacitors. They're 60 years old, 70 years old, they're not reliable anymore. Electrolytics, the same thing. If you want to have a radio that's, when you're done overhauling it, it's going to play for 20 years without ever failing, and you don't want to ruin your transformers and stuff, you're going to get rid of all your old electrolytics. So these are going to go. This is going to go. We can look at the end and see if we see any bubbling or popping. We don't see any obvious thing there. We don't see any burned resistors in here. We don't see any obvious arc marks. Here's the band switch. Band switch doesn't look to be burned up. Not the band switch, but the loading switch that switches in these loading capacitors. Check these things physically to see if they're loose. Here's the band switch. It does function. This section of it doesn't look to be burned up. That's good. Another paper capacitor. Another paper capacitor. Here's some more electrolytics down here. We'll look at the ends for bubbling and popping. We can see some splitting on the end of that one. Those are highly suspect, and those will go. So all in all, there's not that many. Here's 1, 2, double section, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrolytic capacitors, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paper capacitors. We know we're going to replace those. We've got a line cord, some old lamp cord. We know that's going to go. These bypasses from the line to the to a chassis ground are suspect, and a lot of people will replace those as a safety measure. Probably not a bad idea. Typically, we'll find that these ceramic capacitors, disc capacitors, and mica capacitors will not go bad. Once in a while you'll find a bad mica, but generally you don't worry about those things. All the switches, all the pots, all the tube sockets, all the power sockets and antenna sockets will get cleaned with deoxit, and that will lubricate those. We'll clean these switches. If they look bad enough, we'll take an abrasive rubber typewriter eraser pencil, and we'll clean the surfaces of the band switches and wafer switches, and then hit them with the deoxit after that. So anyway, this is not bad. There's no obvious modifications in here. The wiring quality was good. I don't see, bad solder joints or anything else. Here's a little oozing wax from the mic input transformer, so we'll have to look at that. That might be suspect. With the manual, the aid of the manual, we can measure the primary and secondary of the modulation transformer and check it for shorts and proper resistance, and if that looks good, almost certainly it's going to work okay. Earlier I said this is the filter choke down here, I think. Yeah, And earlier I called a low voltage transformer a filter choke, and I was wrong, but it's been a while. So anyway, that's one of the kinds of things you do. Usually probably do that before you spend a lot of time cleaning it. If you found major components missing, or somebody taken a hammer to it, or had been underwater or something, we might think about whether or not we were going to overhaul it. But it's very seldom that I find one of these transmitters that is not serviceable, even though it looks crusty. This one's got, some rust on the little transformers on the top, and it was crusty and dirty looking, but almost certainly going to be serviceable. It doesn't have frozen up controls. I found them with frozen band switches and all sorts of other things. They've even had to make new shafts for them and all that. But this one is going to be just fine, I think.